This week on Dream Deals, we'll be talking to the owner of perhaps one of the most distinctive cars of all time, the Lotus Europa. Plus, Brendan Coogan will be telling you how to get hold of two of Japan's finest exports, the Toyota MR2 and Celica. But first, Adam Cole takes a drive in the latest version of Mazda's legendary MX-5.
On Hot Wheels, we usually feature some very exotic machinery in this slot, but this week we're looking at a car which brought fun and affordable motoring back into the mainstream.
Take yourself back to Britain in 1989. Car manufacturers were going mad for 200-mile-an-hour ultra-expensive supercars, and you needed some serious money to get behind the wheel of anything more exciting than a hot hatch. Not that there's anything wrong with hot hatches, but not everybody wants to drive what is essentially a heated-up shopping car.
Who would have thought that a car company producing good but essentially boring cars could start a sports car revolution?
Mazda launched the MX-5 in early 1990, the purchase price of £14,895, or comparable with a 16-valve Golf GTI at the time. The original 115 brake horsepower 1.6 litre engine was never going to set your hair on fire, but that wasn't the point. The punters loved it, the waiting list shot up. This is the second generation MX-5 launched in 1998. In updating the car, Mazda chose the if it ain't broke, don't fix it method and made very few alterations to the design. On the outside, the pop-up headlamps of the car went, replaced by fixed units. The body shape became curvier, but is still unmistakably the MX-5.
Well, to be honest, the dashboard's a bit of a letdown. Loads of black plastic everywhere. Controls are well laid out, good build quality. You don't feel like the control's going to come off in your hand. But what do you expect from a car whose price starts at just over £16,000? Of course, you don't just buy a sports car because of the interior. You buy it because of the fun it provides. Like so many other sports cars before it, the MX-5 keeps the engine at the front and the power down at the rear. In the dry, the MX-5 is a hell of a lot of fun. It holds the road like a dream. You can throw it round bends, but in the wet, it's very different. The back end is very, very frisky. If it's damp, you've got to be very careful.
The car was originally launched with a 1.6 litre engine, a 1.8 joined the range in 1994, and the second generation of the car continues with the same two engine specification levels. The 1.8 litre fitted to this car produces a very healthy 140 brake horsepower, giving performance which can be described as brisk opposed to breathtaking. In the 1.8, 0 to 60 comes up in a little under 8 seconds with a top speed around 126 miles an hour. After the MX-5's success, other manufacturers launched cars of their own in an attempt to try and cash in on some of the action. BMW launched their Z3, Rover put the F back into MG, and recently the MR2 shrank in class and priced to crash the party. And Vauxhall brought out their Lotus Europa-based VX220.
With the MX-5, Mazda's tapped into the formula left behind in the 60s, the affordable sports car, but this time with 90s build quality and reliability. No longer did the owners have to worry about a leaky roof or the car's ability to make the distance over a journey.
The MX-5 may not be the most up-to-date kid on the block, and some of its rivals are faster, but with over 500,000 MX-5 sold worldwide, the car is one of the most popular sports cars of all time.
Launched in 1966, the Lotus Europa was never destined to be one of the prettiest sports cars. But Lotus had never introduced the car for the catwalk. It was meant for the racetrack. Based on a racing model, the car offered sports car performance at a fraction of the price. Despite its racing heritage, the question of the car's looks still remains. So what is the car's appeal?
The fact it's such an unusual car, you see so few on the roads, considering that they made over 9,000 of these, many of which of course went over to the continent. But now I reckon there's only 3, maybe 400 as an absolute maximum left in the country. They're so rarely seen on the road, maybe 1 or 2 in the time that I've had the car. So to have something that's an unusual car, it's one that's not seen, but basically it's the thrill of driving it. It's a wonderful driving car, whether it's from the handling, the performance, the whole thing. It's an experience, and it's one I've got into my blood and I just can't get rid of. It's an experience that is wonderful. It's so easy to drive. It's a wonderful car to drive, except of course for speed bumps and the motorway. Motorways is not a lot of fun. There is no weight in the front of the car. You get overtaken by a lorry or you overtake a lorry and the front end's all over the place. It's not one that I'd enjoy driving 300 miles.
With only 9,000 models being produced, the availability of the Europa is going to be scarce. But if you're lucky enough to find one, how much should you be paying for your classic Europa?
Certainly for a baseline Europa Series 2, you'd get a good usable car for £5,000–6,000. This one is probably worth about £10,000, and you could pay anything up to £20,000 for a freshly restored concourse car. When I first had the car, I had one or two niggling problems, but if you keep on top of the maintenance with these, there's no real problem. The old mythology of these always breaking down isn't true. It doesn't happen, unless you ignore them, of course.
With a limited production run, how hard is it to find parts for the car?
Most of the parts can be found out. There's a good network of dealers in this country, but you get to know people. There are always people who can offer advice on where parts are available. There's no great problem. When it comes to cost, it depends what you're talking about. A replacement gearbox, rebuilt gearbox, is probably about £400. When I restored this one, I fitted a new chassis to it. New chassis now cost £1,300. So, in the run of things, for a fairly exotic car, no, I would say that prices are pretty reasonable.
Now, buying a classic car can hold its problems, so did Steve seek any advice?
No, I was, I suppose, very, very lucky. I happened to see this one in a car, went, bought it, and I've not had any real problems with it. These days, I think I would recommend that if you're looking to buy one of these, that you get in touch with the local specialists. They'll be happy to advise you and tell you what you should be looking out for when buying one of these. There isn't a great deal to check out. Maybe the chassis, that would be the major problem, but because they're obtainable from local Lotus dealers, there's no real problem in replacing that.
So, after having the car for over 20 years, would Steve recommend the Europa?
Depends what you want. If you want a car that is going to fit you and the entire family in and take you away on a 2-week holiday, no, I wouldn't touch it with a birch pole. If you want something you can get out at the weekends, take on the vast majority of the roads in the country as long as they're not speed bumps, and have a damn good time, I'd recommend it every inch of the way. It's a wonderful experience.
Production of the Europa ceased in 1975 and was replaced by the critically acclaimed Giugiaro-designed Esprit. Despite criticism over its design, the Europa delivered what Colin Chapman had always promised, a sports car for the masses. Well, that's it for part 1 of Dream Deals, but join us in part 2 when Brendan Coogan will be showing you how to get hold of Toyota's classic MR2 and Celica. Toyota are probably not the first name you think of when buying a used sports car, but among the Corollas and Carinas lie a couple of classics. This week, Dream Deals looks at the Celica and MR2. Aimed at the young at heart, the Celica range was launched in 1971. Available originally only as a 2-door coupe, the Celica was Toyota's version of the Mustang, and it sold very well. By the mid-80s, the Celica had gained power and pounds, and had evolved into more of a GT.
It's debatable whether you could call the Celica a true sports car. It's a sports coupe because, of course, it's a lot more practical. There's tons of room in the back and in the boot, and you can get probably a family of 4 in it. So I wouldn't call it a true sports car. Plus, it's front-wheel drive and, of course, the engine's at the front. But what you do get is a lot of looks for your money. The look of the Celica is superb. The lines are beautiful, and it's an all-round very attractive car. Now this Celica ST has got an 1800 engine which generates about 110, 120 brake horsepower. It's more than adequate, but it certainly won't blow anyone's socks off, let alone mine. The handling of this Celica is, I have to say, very poor. The front wheel drive is scrabbling for grip, especially in the wet like this, and it understeers very badly, I'm afraid. But you're getting style and looks for your money. This 1800 ST is on an S plate and it costs just under 10 grand, which I think is a lot of money, because for that you could get, I don't know, a 16 valve Mondeo, which is going to run just as well, and of course you get all of the comfort and practicality of a Mondeo. So what are you getting for your money? 10 grand is a lot for a second-hand car, especially one like this. What are you getting? Well, it's Toyota build quality, which may be cheap and nasty, but as we all know, it'll last forever. And you get quite a high level of specification inside it: air conditioning, a fancy stereo, electric everything, and well, a nice metallic paint job as well. Although lilac's not my colour, it's not very this year. The one thing I am impressed with in this Celica is the brakes. Even in this wet weather today, you can slam on the anchors and it just won't skid. I don't know, I don't think it's got ABS. It feels like it has, but it's just won't skid. Brakes are good. I think when you're buying a dream car that's a sports car or a sports coupe, you want something of that wow factor that, you know, makes people look at you when you're driving down the road. It's not a posing thing, it's just that certain je ne sais quoi, I don't know what the French call it. Well, this car just hasn't got it. The MR2 has got great handling. The MX-5 has got great looks and pedigree. What's the Celica got? Great build quality? 10 grand, I want something that people are going to look at. Not my idea of a dream car, sorry.
Alongside the Celica, Toyota also offers the MR2. Launched in 1985, the MR2 was designed to offer sports car fun to the masses. Powered by a 1.6 16-valve engine, giving out 112 brake horsepower, the performance was quick, but not blistering. It was the mid-engine rear-wheel drive layout that provided the fun.
Now today we've been looking at used Toyotas, namely MR2s and Celicas, and we've enlisted the help of Rick here from Oakmere Toyota in Northwich, Cheshire. First of all, what do you put down the appeal, the great appeal of MR2s to?
I think the nice thing about the MR2 is that they're a great fun car, extremely reliable, and they just generally appeal to the masses, whether young or old. You know, everybody has always wanted or has owned an MR2.
What is your typical customer though that comes into the showroom looking at used MR2s?
I think generally we're either going to be looking at the young person who's not really got a lot of commitments, who want to express themselves with the car and have a nice, you know, different looking vehicle, and also the older customer where the children have left home maybe, and they've got this little bit more cash now and they want to treat themselves to a fun vehicle that they can use at the weekends or possibly every day.
Sounds like my father going through a midlife crisis. Let's first of all talk about the MR2 itself. What would we be looking at for a typical example of a used car that's, say, 2, 3, 4 years old?
MR2s generally around that age, you're probably going to be looking around £10,000 mark, just depending on the model and the year of the car. The two obvious models that you're going to be looking at there are the usual coupe MR2 GT and also the T-Bar as well, which was the glass removable roof model, which you will pay a little bit more for, but obviously you've got the extra luxury of the removable roof and leather interior as well.
In terms of if we were buying a used model, what would we be looking out for in terms of wear and tear, things to look out for? Obviously, if we're not coming to a dealership like this, what would we be looking for?
I think the classic things, as with any used car, you're going to initially want to look around the vehicle. Good indications as to how the car's been treated are going to be with the wheels, just to see how they are, if they're scuffed or marked. And then obviously looking around the exterior parts of the car that are likely to be damaged, like the bumpers, and also the interior.
Now that's a good rule of thumb for buying any used car. Is there anything specifically about an MR2 or a Celica that you should look out for? I mean, gearbox wear and tear? Or?
The cars are I know we like to say this, but the cars are extremely reliable. There's no sort of one fault which you're going to have to put down with the vehicles. The only thing that you would have to look out for on some of these cars is obviously going to be put down to how the car's been owned previously and who's been driving the car. There isn't any known faults with any model, but really just if you're looking at service history and how the vehicle's been maintained, if you get a car which has been looked after from day one, you shouldn't really have any trouble with them at all.
When does a typical MR2 do most of its depreciation? Obviously in the first couple of years. So
Yeah.
you can pick up hopefully models after that that haven't depreciated too much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously with the introduction about a year and a half ago now, the new MR2, the previous shape model, the GTT bars especially, are very good value for money now. And of course they have depreciated quite a bit. But obviously, you know, there's good bargains out there for the second-hand buyer.
Say I was buying one second hand, would you recommend that we came to a dealership like yours to buy it? Or if we've seen one privately, can we enlist your help to look over the car for us?
Ourselves as a dealer aren't actually going to go out and obviously look at the car with you, although obviously buying a used car privately isn't really a problem, as long as obviously you can check up the car properly with the HPI reports and things to make sure they have been maintained. What you'll obviously see the difference with a dealer is especially a difference in what we can guarantee that the car has had in the past, and also what we'll do for you in the future, so that you can obviously eliminate the time and hassle of looking into the car a bit more deeply by coming to a dealer and let us do that for you.
Sure.
For early models, look to pay around £1,000, with prices rising to between £3,000 and £5,000 for decent Mark II models. T-bar models are available from £5,000 upwards. The MR2 also received a radical redesign in 2000. Its edgy design is aimed at younger buyers and provides serious roadster performance on a budget. Now if I say Vauxhall, you probably think of sales reps or annoying white Astra vans driven by even more annoying builders. You probably don't think of sports cars. And that's a bit unfair because, believe it or not, it's Vauxhall who actually built the world's first ever sports car back in the 1900s. And now, well, they build this, the awesome VX220. Now don't let the badge at the front put you off. Although the car's been built in conjunction with Lotus, it's not an Elise clone. Less than 10% of the Vauxhall's 2,500 components are common to the Lotus. Vauxhall are confident that the car has the looks and the power to entice many buyers more attracted to softer options, like the Toyota MR2, Rover MGF and Mazda MX-5. And who am I to argue with them? Now, if you're at all familiar with the VX220, you'll know that it's built by Lotus at their Norwich factory and that it's based on a prototype Elise chassis. But if you think it's just an Elise rebadged as a Vauxhall, well, you'd be wrong. I've actually driven both cars and I can tell you that the VX220 is completely different. Now the biggest difference the VX220's got over the Elise is with the engine. There's no 1.8K series up front. Instead we've got a 2.2 litre aluminium unit producing 145 brake horsepower. Now that doesn't sound a lot by today's standards, but this is where the weight factor comes in, because when you stick 145 brake into a car that only weighs 875 kilograms, the performance is fantastic. 0 to 60 takes under 6 seconds and it'll take you onto a top speed of 137 miles an hour. Now because this car's built with weight saving in mind, don't expect too many whistles and bells in the cabin. Heater yes, but electric windows and air conditioning, no. But who needs aircon when you've got the whole world out there? Now admittedly I'm having a fantastic time driving this car on these Spanish roads, but any performance that you do extract here is only a small part of the story. Because to really see what it can do, you need to get it out on the racetrack. Got a 2.2 litre 4-cylinder engine, 145 brake horsepower, but because this car's so light at only 875 kilos, it feels unbelievably sports car-like. Way into the corner, in. They've actually laid cones out onto the circuit, so we can try and get the racing line right, but when you get a little bit excited, you can start to slide away, as the cameraman's finding out. Sorry, Stan. It's not until you get onto a racetrack with something like the VX220 that you realise how much grip these cars have. Obviously on the open road you can't risk coming off, but here, if I do make a mess of it, which is rather likely, hey, I'm not going to kill myself, I'm not going to kill anyone else, and I'm not going to damage the car, so it does allow you to put a little bit more power in than you would if you were on the M25. Fantastic. Now I can't understand why we don't hear more about the VX220. Yes, I know you can get an Elise for the same money, 23 grand, but personally I think this thing drives better, certainly more practical on a daily basis, and it even looks a bit nicer. But if you're still not convinced that Vauxhall can do performance cars, just have a look who's doing so well in the Touring Car Championships. Well, that's it for this week's Dream Deals, but on next week's show, Brendan Coogan will be taking a drive in a modern version of a true British classic, the Caterham 7. Plus, we'll be getting to grips with one of today's most exciting cars, the rally-inspired Subaru Impreza WRX.